Hello there, this is Miriam, holistic life coach and mind body practitioner at Pain Outside the Box. And today I'm going to be using an analogy to explain what's going on in most people with chronic mind body pain or TMS. So I'd like you to think of a large pot on the stove, and I'd like you to think of any early childhood traumas that you went through as the first few ingredients that are going to go into this pot. So let's say situations of abandonment, shock in childhood, bullying, whatever happened. Just think of these as the first few ingredients that go into the pot. And with these ingredients, the pot is okay, it's not overflowing, it's just brewing there on the stove. Then you go into your teenage years or into adulthood, and you keep on encountering certain stressful situations, right? So life gets more stressful, you realize that you need to be more responsible, you realize that life is tough. Maybe you lose a friend, maybe you have a conflict with a family member, and think of all of these tiny things as other ingredients that are being added to the stove. And also think of the flame underneath the pot getting stronger and stronger. So the stew is brewing, right? And you might still be feeling pretty much okay. You might be thinking, okay, this is how life is. And let's say in your teenage or early adult years, you have other distractions going on in life. You have other positive experiences, okay, that make it more or less okay. You know, they make life great sometimes, and we are able to maybe ignore those old childhood traumas at the bottom of the pot. We are still able to be positive and live our life. Then maybe come your late 20s or 30s, and you might get married, or you might be promoted, and you might have kids, and there are even more stressors going on in your life than there were before. And of course, everyone is different, okay? And this is why TMS happens in people of all ages. But what typically happens is that we start feeling these mind-body pains, real physical pain in the body. It typically comes out of nowhere, and the onset is typically related to the pot on the stove starting to overflow, okay? So at a certain point, although you have ongoing tension, you have ongoing stressors, at a certain point, the pot is still okay. It's not overflowing. It's just cooking, right? Of course, there are still negative emotions going on, but it's kind of bearable. You have other distractions, of other positive things in life. You're able to handle it. There's a balance. But the problem becomes evident when that balance starts to tip over, right? So when something, an event, another shock, another trauma, another conflict, okay? It could be anything. It could be almost a minor thing when you consider, when you compare it to the rest of the things that might have happened. But something suddenly tips the scale, okay? Something suddenly makes that pot overflow. A little bit more heat, and that's it. And this is when people typically experience a TMS onset, which might be in the form of a muscle spasm, very common in the back area, in the legs, sciatica. Okay, for some people, it starts with pain on one part of the body and then spreads to other parts of the body, such as in cases of fibromyalgia, for example. And and we think that maybe we did something to hurt ourselves. Maybe we were overactive, maybe we had an injury, but really and truly, what would have happened is that that pot started to overflow because of maybe the last thing that happened, the last ingredient that was added to cause the overflow. So obviously, when you look at TMS in this way, and when you look at your options and the way ahead, it's obviously usually not enough to just eliminate that one last ingredient, right? So let's say your TMS came up after you had a conflict with your partner or shortly after you had a kid. It's not just about resolving the conflict. It's not perhaps just about reducing the stressors around having a kid. It's usually about addressing all of those other ingredients, or at least becoming aware of them so you can realize what's underneath, okay? What has been driving your emotional tension? This is really the question that you need to be asking yourself. And usually, in the case of TMS, we look for the emotions that have been ongoing, okay? It's not just something that happened once. It's something that you've been carrying along for a long period of time, right? And it could be due to something that happened just once. Let's say you had a conflict once with a family member. But what happens then is that since that day, you've been carrying around this resentment internally. You've been leaving it festering in there. Or if we use the same analogy, you've been leaving it in the pot, okay, to simmer and simmer. And you've been adding more to it, and that's when it all overflows. So if I were to give you a tip, if you're about to start on your emotional journey to try and get out of chronic pain or symptoms, I would look for those emotions that you are carrying around constantly or almost constantly. So things to ask yourself would be, what do you often think about that makes you feel scared or angry or resentful? What do you often think about that makes you feel helpless, that makes you feel not enough? Okay? And then, of course, you might link those feelings of helplessness or not enoughness to that trauma you had in the past, to those first few ingredients. And it's cool to make sense of that. But the most important thing today, rather than undoing the past or resolving every single trauma, the most important thing that you need to do today is to turn off the heat, right? So you can't undo the past, but you can turn off the heat by, first of all, allowing yourself to express these emotions that have been festering inside. Maybe with your friend, maybe with a therapist. By reducing all of the things that are creating additional pressure and causing the pot to overflow, okay? So some things are really actionable. Let's say you're finding a project to be too much for you. You might need to get help. You might need to get support. You might need to let go of something, an activity or a project, because it's just become too much. So some things are simpler than others, okay? So for the sake of simplicity, always think about reducing the pressure and turning off the heat from that stove, from that pot, so it doesn't continue to overflow. Let's be realistic here. It's not about eliminating everything. It's not about emptying the pot completely, okay? We have a whole history behind us. It is about turning off the heat. And with that said, I'll leave you to your own personal reflections, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.